Hi, welcome to our new Stewardship and Engagement update from your EQ Investors team. I'm Johnny Bowie and I'm joined by my colleague Louisiana Salge, and today we're going to talk about stewardship and engagement. So stewardship refers to the powers that investors are provided as shareholders to sort of push for changes within sustainability or financially material topics. And we as EQ investors really believe that we need to actively engage and push for change, as we recognize that no company or asset manager is perfect. So today we're going to be talking about one of our sort of strategic engagement themes, which is biodiversity, which Louisiana has been running this year. And we're going to be talking about sort of why she's picked that topic and what levers she can use through an engagement tool she can use to drive change and create value for our clients. So, Louisiana, over to you. I guess the first question is, why did you choose biodiversity risk as an engagement?
Yeah, thank you, Johnny. So, we need to kind of look at the stats on nature. We live in a world where nature is rapidly declining, biodiversity loss is very imminent and, I guess, accelerating in size. And we are not detached from this. So businesses are driving some of this biodiversity loss by using natural resources in an unsustainable way. And while our sustainable portfolios do not invest in some of the largest drivers of biodiversity loss, of course, there still is indirect linkages which we need to address. And second of all, it's also financially material. So as businesses are dependent on degrading natural resources, that's a risk. Both a financial risk because, the essence, what that is driving their business model is being declined, but also reputational risk if you get caught and increasing regulation that might hit you with additional cost. So all of this is driving our choice.
That's very interesting. So in terms of how you approached your biodiversity engagement this year, can you go into a bit more detail into that?
Yeah, we use three levers usually. The first one is trying to engage with fund managers that we invest with to kind of drive best practice and take up of how they are managing biodiversity risk and their engagement and their stock selection. Second of all, we engage through collaborations directly with companies that have a strategic position. And then thirdly, we go to annual general meetings of companies held within the portfolios that we manage in order to drive change directly with boards.
So Louisiana, how does fund manager engagement work and how successful were you?
Yeah, so when it comes to biodiversity and fund manager engagement, we first need to understand which fund managers to engage with. And what we did is we used a scientific data set called Encore, which basically maps the most high-risk industries that are dependent on nature, really. And we looked at which fund managers had exposure to these high-risk sectors, and these became our priority for the year. We established key best practices, and that comes from our 3-year-long cycle of engagement on biodiversity. So we have a good idea of what they should be doing in order to limit biodiversity risk and capture the opportunity there. So that's how we designed, I guess, the objectives for the engagement. And when it comes to how successful we're very successful. So over half actually adhered to a new objective that they previously didn't, which is a good progress. And what does that mean, really? So, for example, last year, only about 35% were part of a collaborative engagement initiative when it comes to biodiversity risk. And at the end of the year, and at the end of our engagement cycle, it was over 80%.
Wow, that's very impressive. At EQ Investors, we are keen supporters of collaborative engagements, which basically means sort of like-minded investors get together and sort of push companies on a specific topic. Can you go a bit more detail into what the UNPRI Spring Group is and how it's helping to look at biodiversity risk?
Yeah, so the UNPRI Spring Group is a collaborative engagement initiative. We're one of about 80 investors, and we engage on 40 companies that were selected to have a strategic focus on biodiversity and trying to halt loss by 2030, which is kind of the global commitment that we've set. The way it works is that we are supporting engagement with two companies specifically. One Brazilian bank, which is called Banco Bradesco, and there our focus really is on their lending activities to agricultural companies, because if you imagine, Brazilian agricultural companies could be linked to deforestation in the Amazon, which is a huge biodiversity hub. So they're really trying to drive responsible practices to minimize that risk. And secondly, our other focus is on a pharmaceutical and hygiene product company, which is called Reckitt. And there we are focusing on some of their key ingredients, which is paper pulp and also palm oil, and trying to get their transparency of where these products are coming from up to 100% sustainable sourcing.
And EQ also uses AGMs quite a lot. And I believe last year we went to sort of 2 AGMs where we pushed the biodiversity agenda. So can you go to a bit more detail on what the outcomes were for that?
Yeah, of course. So any share allows you to attend an annual general meeting of a company. We use that kind of democratized platform in order to drive change with the board of directors, which ultimately are the ones that are responsible to shareholders like us and our clients. So what we've done is I personally went to a company called Croda, which is a bio-based chemicals business up in Harrogate, up in the north of the UK. And there I went to push them, among other things, to try to commit to 100% sourcing, traceability, and sustainable sourcing targets for their key inputs, key bio-based inputs, which is important in order to limit biodiversity impact and land impacts. And then we also attended, Damien actually, one of our colleagues, attended the AGM of DS Smith, which is a cardboard packaging company. They actually do a lot of recycling in-house, which is great, and that's why we like the business. But they still have dependency on kind of origin and first origin paper pulp coming from trees, coming from timber, coming from potentially, forests that might be at risk. So there, Damien attended to ask them on creating biodiversity restoration targets for those forests in which they actually are operational in. And it was a really interesting point in time because they're going through a merger at the moment, and they reassured us that us being there and holding them to account at a really key point in time at this merger really helped them to put this into their new strategy going forward. So it really shows us that these times can be really critical, and we're glad that we were there.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And then looking ahead, I guess, where do you see this biodiversity engagement going in the next year or so?
So we are keenly awaiting regulation coming in from Europe and also the UK, which will make the biodiversity risk question more financially material, which will kind of supercharge our engagement both with fund managers and the underlying companies. So as long as our fund managers are not yet adhering to all of our best practices, this is really where we're going to focus in on, and we will report back to our clients on progress using our milestones and KPI framework.
Great. Well, thank you very much for answering our questions on biodiversity today. That concludes our update for today. Many thanks for listening.